The Department of International Relations says that these violations included the repeated use of official Israeli social media platforms to launch insulting attacks against President Cyril Ramaphosa and a deliberate failure to inform DECO of purported visit by senior Israeli officials. It says such actions represent a gross abuse of diplomatic privilege and a fundamental breach of the Vienna Convention. It added that they have systematically undermined the trust and protocols essential for bilateral relations. DECO says a statement is required to leave South Africa within 72 hours.
Burkina Faso's junta has announced a ban on all political parties whose activities have been suspended since the military seized power in 2022. Junta leader Captain Ibrahim Traoré has been criticized for suppressing dissent. The move has been seen as the latest action to tighten control. According to Burkina Faso's Interior Minister Emile Zerbo, the plan is part of plans to rebuild the state after what he said were numerous abuses in the country's multi-party system. Zerbo says the old system used to promote division among citizens and weaken the social fabric. And finally, Russia says it's agreed to stop shelling in the Ukrainian capital Kyiv until Sunday at the request of US President Donald Trump. The Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov says the truce is aimed at facilitating peace talks due in Abu Dhabi the same day.
Indeed, President Trump made a personal request to President Putin to refrain from attacking Kyiv until the 1st of February. This is in order to create favorable conditions for negotiations. That's all I can say on this matter.
Recapping the top story this hour, the South African Police Service has strongly condemned an outburst allegedly by an Umkhonto weSizwe party supporter at the protests at Durban's Addington Primary School earlier this week, in which she called a police spokesperson a derogatory name, usually referring to foreign nationals from the rest of the continent. For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Jolani Tulo Mwepe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Sevilla is in the final stages of appointing a new owner to take over in the coming months. And Lesotho's failed high-altitude sports center has never been fully operational. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Connecting Africa to the world. Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni brings you the latest insights on Africa's economy. Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine, weekdays 6 till 9.
Malawians go to the polls next week in a high-stakes general election where citizens will choose a new president and 229 members of parliament. And this comes 5 years after the country's 2019 election was annulled by the Constitutional Court due to widespread irregularities in a landmark decision that overturned the victory of the then-president Peter Mutharika.
I'm not saying we're a perfect government. No, nobody is. I mean, we've seen even South Africa facing challenges with the fuel that's going up and with whatever challenges. But you know what? When you are dealing with an IMF policy that says do not employ so many people because you are going to become a welfare government and all of that. And Dr. Chakwera said I've got high numbers of unemployment. As a government that is answerable to Malawians, we have found IMF policies wanting on many issues. We believe the people who pay us taxes to put us in our positions, we owe them employment at the minimum.
That's Dr. Jesse Kwabila, who's the Minister of Higher Education in Malawi.
Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine. Africa Update on Channel Africa with Lulu Kabu.
Congolese President Felix Tshisekedi has now accused Rwanda of violating the peace deal. Are you surprised at this latest accusation? This is literally days after a signing a ceremony, so to speak.
This is not surprising. I mean, if you ask Paul Kagame, he would also say almost the same thing. One should ask a question. The broker of the peace deal, President Trump, what is it that he wants? Why now? And why is this peace deal being signed in the Americas and not in the Great Lakes? Paul Kagame has never respected Tshisekedi, as often say. Tshisekedi must deal with the problems in his country. He has nothing to do with it. So this peace deal, obviously, when it was signed, one just looked at it and said, this will not last.
Kenny Matiba, former journalist.
Africa Update with Lulu Kabu, 12 to 1 p.m. Central African Time. Stay ahead with Africa in Business, where Thami Ngubeni unpacks your go-to source for Africa's economic trends.
Captain here to help, right, boys?
Set sail with us on a digital voyage like no other. Channel Africa has a treasure trove of awesomeness. That is our website and social media pages.
Tell me, why are you here?
We want you to be part of our adventure.
The winds are changing, Captain. And this time...
Imagine a world where curiosity knows no bounds, where entertainment meets enlightenment, and where every click leads to the African perspective. Visit us on our website, www.channelafrica.co.za, or follow us on Instagram or on X at Channel Africa One. Go on, like us on Facebook at Channel Africa One. So, spread the word. Tell a friend that Channel Africa's online variety is what they need on the web. Channel Africa, the African perspective. 60 years of stories, sounds, and spirits. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Zilipendwa na Abedi Jean de la Croix.
Wewe ni mjasiriamali unajihusisha na biashara ya kuuza dawa. Jaribu kutuambia kwanza, kwa nini ulianzisha biashara hiyo?
Tutasema kwamba maisha ya kila siku ni kwamba mtu anapashwa kuwa na maisha ya kuweza kujitegemea. Usitegemee kuajiriwa, lakini utegemee kujiajiri, na baadaye utaweza ukaajiri wengine. Na hiyo ilinipa msukumo mkubwa kwa kuweza kujiajiri na kampuni hii kwa ajili ya kuweza kuwasaidia wale ambao wanahangaika zaidi.
Unauza aina gani ya dawa?
Unasema ni dawa, lakini kwetu sisi tunaita kama vile ni pipi, ambayo ni virutubisho ambavyo vinakwenda kusaidia kwa wale ambao wanatatizwa na aina tofauti ya magonjwa.
Virutubisho hivyo sasa vinatibu magonjwa gani?
Virutubisho hivi vinatunza magonjwa kama vile ya kisukari, shinikizo la damu.
Zilipendwa kila Jumamosi kuanzia saa 12 kamili majira ya Afrika ya Kati hadi saa 1 kamili majira ya Afrika ya Kati.
Keep Africa in your hands. Connect to our website for all your news, sports, and cultural updates. channelafrica.co.za.
Nkhanza zokhudza amuna ndi azimayi kapena kuti gender-based violence, GBV, zikuwononga mioyo komanso kuphwasula midzi. Zikuchitika m'manyumba, m'masukulu, malo ogwirira ntchito, ndipo kwambiri mwakachetechete. Koma sizikuyenera kupitirira. Mukazimva, yankhulani. Ngati mwakhuzidwa, funani chithandizo. Chifukwa kusachita chilichonse sikuthandiza. Mverani kuma wireless onse 14 a SABC kuchokera lachitatu pa 23 mwezi uno wa Julai kuti mumve zokambirana, malangizo, masewero, zionetsero za maphunziro ndi mafunso okhuza nkhanza za amuna ndi azimayi ndi akatswiri, anthu opulumuka ku nkhanzazi, kukhazikitsa lamulo komanso dziko lonse lokhuzidwa ndi nkhanzazi. Zonsezi pa wireless yomwe mumayikonda ya SABC. Imbirani pa nambala 0800 428 428 kuti munene za nkhanzazi kapena kupeza chithandizo. Nkhanza zokhuza amuna ndi azimayi zimatha ndi inu. Uthenga ukufikani kuchokera ku SABC.
6 decades strong, Channel Africa continues to inspire Africa and the world, proudly sharing
the African perspective.
Você é fluente em português? É apaixonado por rádio e quer trabalhar África do Sul? Você tem documentos que o qualificam para trabalhar na África do Sul? Nesse caso, podemos ter uma oportunidade para você trabalhar no Canal África. Envie seu currículo e demonstração para Canal África at newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Lembre-se, se você não receber alguma resposta nossa em 14 dias, isso significa que você não foi selecionado. Canal África, a perspectiva africana.
Connecting Africa to the world. Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni brings you the latest insights on Africa's economy. Business, trade, and investment opportunities that put the continent first. Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni.
It is a very good afternoon to you, Egypt. Good afternoon to you, Ghana, Nigeria, Eritrea. Good afternoon, Africa. Welcome to the Friday edition of Africa in Business. I'm Thami Ngubeni. Coming up this hour, US President Donald Trump to announce his pick to replace Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell, with speculation intensifying that the nod will go to former Fed Governor Kevin Walsh, and concerns over the decision by the government of Ghana to reduce its gold reserves by 51%. This and a whole lot more coming up on your Friday edition.
Stay ahead with Africa in Business, where Thami Ngubeni unpacks your go-to source for Africa's economic trends and development.
Well, for our weekly business roundup this afternoon, we're joined, as usual, by Victor Khomuswana, author of Africa is Open for Business and Africa Bounces Back. Victor is also the Executive Director for Marketing and Communication at the University of Limpopo. A good Friday afternoon to you, Victor.
Good Friday afternoon, Thami. Good to talk to you again.
As always, great news for African startups. They're about to get quite a number of billions from a small, rich island and Gulf financiers. A whopping $180 billion. How did that come about?
Yeah, they when they say small island, they make it sound like Malta or one of those, what do we call them, tax havens. No, this is actually Japan. The story is very interesting because startups normally don't require a lot of money if they are in the tech space because it's mainly an intellectual kind of territory. The interesting thing is this 180 billion is according to a company called Brighter Intelligence, which specializes in market research for emerging markets. Their 2025 report analyzed what has been happening, what the trends are, and they found that at least 16 enterprises got $1 million in funding or investment, whereas about 32 enterprises in the tech space received $100,000 or more. Now, that's a small amount if you are comparing it to how much you will need to start a mine, for example, or establish an agriculture enterprise or build a factory. But because of, as I say, most of the startups in the tech space rely on software, they rely on technology that you can literally carry in the boot of your car. 100,000 tends to go a long way as you invest in the development. This is a 33% increase in the amount of tech funding. So $180 billion is a total, but it's just broken among so many smaller enterprises in smaller amounts that were raised from the Japan through the Japan International Cooperation Agency and companies like Toyota and companies like Sony, who are now the major investors on the African continent. But the Gulf states, yet again, we always emphasize this, don't just look at the funders from China, from Russia, from the US, from Europe. Those are still investing, but the Gulf states, the United Arab Emirates and all that are beginning to dominate this space, whether it's in tech, even in mining, they do invest in energy. So it's just an interesting of how diverse the sources of funding for startups in Africa are so diversified and a lot more diversified, which means Africa has got a lot more bargaining power when it comes to negotiating some of these terms.
Landscape certainly has shifted and is quickly shifting as far as that is concerned. And we see the Dangote Industries bringing on MTN Group Limited CEO Ralph Mupita onto the board of its fertilizer business.
Yeah, it's a 53-year-old Ralph Mupita, as you know. He's the head of the CEO of the MTN Group Limited. But because of his experience, you know, MTN's largest business in Africa is in Nigeria, where it's the number one mobile network operator by far. And even with all the problems that the company has experienced there, the fines that have been imposed almost by some people arbitrarily, according to some people arbitrarily, what people see as a shakedown, it's still a very large cap company. I think it's second only to Boa Foods Limited at $8.6 billion market cap. And so because of his experience in the 2019 listing of MTN, one, he is obviously respected in the capital market space, but he is also leading one of the largest companies in Nigeria. So when the richest man wants you to be part of his fertilizer business, because they are in the pre-listing stage, they are planning to list sometime this year and expand into the rest of the continent. But for that to happen, they need to expand their $2.5 billion complex so that they can achieve what they want. They want to be able to up their 3 million tons in granulated urea. That's the fertilizer ingredient that per annum. So for that to happen, they need to build on that $2.5 billion complex in Lagos to be able to meet the production needs. Agriculture is something that's top of Dangote's mind. If you ask him, they keep saying to him, where would you invest your money if you had to? He says, don't overlook agriculture, because food security, you know, people will always eat. So whether you are producing for African consumers or you are producing for exports, you will always get that. Now, the inputs in fertilizer will make the farming and the yield that comes from that a lot better. And that is good for Africa because mainly farmers are subsistence farmers.
Oh, really great news coming out there. And we see that Egyptian Exchange has received its first license to trade futures. Why has it taken so long?
No. Because remember, futures are what we call derivatives. And derivatives are not an asset. So you have Thami Enterprises. She's running an automotive business. So she lists the company on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange so people can own a share in Thami's enterprise. Unfortunately, when you start listing your company on the stock exchange, the risk is too high, because one day you've heard it when people report every day, they say the stock markets have taken a tumble, there's a bloodbath. Now, often when you own shares and you are exposed as an institutional investor, a movement, a slight news break or news headline that changes the fortunes of your investors can impair your share price and fortune by a lot. So you find that we started the day owning $100 million worth of investments, but just because of one headline, Donald Trump says this, and the shares take a tumble. So investors and portfolio managers like to have a hedge. A hedge means you buy shares in Thami's company, but just in case there's a violent or a very disruptive movement in the share price, you buy a hedge, which is a derivative, something that is based on an underlying asset. So when markets develop, when they start trading futures, they first trade the shares or the direct assets, and then they develop the secondary market, which allows people to buy shares in your companies, but also be able to hedge in case there's a major movement that can distort or destroy their share prices. So you have the best of both worlds. I think that Thami's business will do well, but in case it doesn't, you also buy other assets, which are called derivatives, to make sure that you are covered for that eventuality as well.
And quickly, as we wrap up this afternoon, Victor, we see that Libya's central bank is suing Zimbabwe's national oil company, but not only the oil company, but the finance minister as well.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a debt from 2001, Thami. They had a credit facility of 90 million. They drew down about 45 million of that from the Libya Foreign Bank, which is a subsidiary of the central bank. But it is said that since they took that loan in 2001, they have only paid back 5.5 million. So the interest plus the principal have now ballooned to over $100 million, which is why they are suing. So they will be saying they are suing the minister because the minister is the chief executive officer when it comes to capital issues. And even though it's not Mthuli Ncube who signed, but it was Simba Makoni, because you sign in your ex officio capacity, this November, UK High Court has granted this order, and they are suing them there, and they're given until the end of this month, which is Sunday, to file their defense.
All right. Thank you so much, Victor Khumsana. Some really, big stories coming out of the African continent as far as business is concerned. Victor, looking forward to same time, same place next week.
Same time, same place. Have a good weekend.
Thank you. You too. That's Victor Khumsana, author of Africa is Open for Business and Africa Bounces Back.
From markets to innovation. From markets to innovation. Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni covers it all. With Africa's future in focus, Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Now, the government of Ghana has reduced its gold reserves by 51%, redirecting part of its holdings into foreign currency investments. The governor of the Bank of Ghana, Dr. Johnson Asiama, says the sharp decline reflects a deliberate portfolio rebalancing rather than a loss, noting that the proceeds are now earning returns on foreign exchange assets, with plans in place to rebuild gold reserves gradually. However, development economist and senior research fellow at the Institute for Economic Research and Public Policy, Dr. Frank Banor, says raised some concerns, calling for a clear explanation over the sudden and significant drop in the country's gold holdings. To unpack this further this afternoon, we joined on the line by Dr. Frank Banor. A very good afternoon to you, Doctor. Welcome to Africa in Business.
Good afternoon to you. Good afternoon to your listeners.
Well, when we look at this 50% reduction in gold reserves, that is substantial by any standard. What makes this move particularly concerning in your view?
Well, thank you very much. Like I've already espoused in most of the write-ups that I've done, it is critical to understand the reason why Ghana decided to build its reserve partly and mostly in gold. If you recall, in 2022, when the Russian-Ukraine war came on board, you realized that Ghana was one of the few countries on the sub-region that actually took a hit of the fallouts of the sanctions that was put on Russia by the superpowers, America and its allies and Europeans. And we had inflation skyrocketing to hyperinflation around about 54.1% thereabout. We had the Ghana cedi, the local currency, depreciating astronomically against major currencies, the US dollar, the euro, and even to some extent the South African rand and other currencies on the African continent. Now, as a fallout of this, the then government, led by its vice president, what you call the deputy president in South Africa, Dr. Alhaji Mahmoud Bawumia, came up with the idea that since gold hedges against inflation, it would be imperative for the country to institute what they call as the domestic gold purchasing program. And the purpose of this domestic gold purchasing program was to shore up the existing reserves. Of course, it is also important for me to put across that since independence, Ghana had its independence in 1957, arguably the first country within the sub-Saharan African region to gain independence. And since independence, Ghana had only accumulated about 8.7 tons of gold from 1967 up until 2022. This was the total gold reserve that Ghana had in its vault. So the past administration saw the need to improve upon this, particularly given the fact that gold can hedge against inflation, and also it also restores some form of confidence in your economy and thereby mitigating some risk as far as your currency volatility is concerned. And when this was instituted, by 2024, Ghana had moved from about 8.7 tons to 30.53 metric tons, which was very significant, representing about 52% of total reserves that the country had. Now, fast forward, the new administration took office in January 2025, and then they added up onto the existing gold reserve that the previous administration had left with about 30.53 tons, as I rightly said. Now, by October 2025, when the Bank of Ghana gave its report in that particular year, the fiscal year of 2025, we realized that the 30.53 metric tons of gold reserve had actually moved to about 38 metric tons, which was a significant feat. And of course, a lot of Ghanaians really gave applause to the new government for continuing with what the previous government had started. Now, 2 days ago, the BOG now releases its report for the December 2025 fiscal year I think specifically on January 26th. And then we get to know for the first time that the gold reserve, which was around 38 tons, had been reduced to 18.6 tons. So we started asking for questions, probing. Only for the BOG, the governor of the Bank of Ghana, as when I refer to BOG, I'm referring to the Bank of Ghana, Dr. Asiama, to come out and say that they scan through Ghana's peers. And technically, when he make reference to peers, I don't really understand what he means by peers. I don't know whether he's referring to countries that Ghana falls within the same GDP per capita with, whether Ghana falls within the same bracket in terms of GDP. I really don't know, or whether he's referring to countries on the African continent or in the sub-Saharan African region. Of course, that one I also don't know, but he said Ghana's peers. And of course, when he said peers, he says the peers are doing between 20 to 25% in terms of gold reserves as a percentage of total reserves. And for that matter, the BOG decided to convert some of the gold into liquid cash so that we fall on the same scale. Now, this is something that I think as an economist is totally unacceptable. Now, why do I say it's unacceptable? It is very unacceptable because one of the reasons why we've seen gold prices climbing to astronomical feet is the fact that a lot of central banks across the world are now seeing gold as a means of backing their currency. And for that matter, central banks are buying more gold than requesting for dollars, as has been the previous years. Now, given the volatility that we've seen within the dollar since last year up till now, we've seen that the dollar has performed poorly against major currencies across the world. And for that matter, the dollar cannot be a safeguard for safe value, a store of value, as far as we used to know it. So gold has become the latest commodity, not just the latest commodity, we knew this for a very long time. But everyone, every financial expert investor is advising their central banks to invest in gold.
So with this situation, Dr. Bano, what then is the way forward? What is it that the Bank of Ghana needs to do in order to reassure the markets about this decision to reduce the gold reserves? And are there plans to rebuild those gold reserves, perhaps through domestic production?
Thank you very much. So one of the things I raise is that when it comes to central banking, it is important for the central bank to instill confidence in consumers, confidence in investors alike. So given what is happening currently, it tells you that there is a lack of confidence as far as the activities of the central bank is concerned, because when the central bank gives an announcement, if the public have confidence in it and then take this announcement into being, that is where this policy transmission mechanism is able to have a broader and multiplier effect on the larger economy. So it is very, very important that as soon as possible, the governor of the central bank, Dr. Asiama, comes out to really tell Ghanaians what necessitated the liquidation and the sudden rebalancing of gold reserves into hard currency, the US dollar. That is very, very important that the BOG governor comes out to tell us. It is also important for the governor of the central bank to also tell Ghanaians how he intends to restock the gold reserve that we have to the where they inherited, because they inherited at 30.53. So if nothing at all, a lot of Ghanaians are saying that we expected them to sell off what they added onto it and leave what they inherited. So it is also imperative on the Bank of Ghana and the governor himself, Dr. Asiama, to inform Ghanaians how he intends to do this. And these are answers that I think only Governor Asiama would be the best person to inform Ghanaians.
Dr. Bano, we thank you so much for your insight on this developing story. Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's Dr. Frank Bano. He's a development economist and is also Senior Research Fellow at the Institute of Economic Research and Public Policy. He takes us to exactly 4:32 Central African time as we head over now to the markets desk, where Nosipho Zuma is standing by with your latest market indicators.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Thami. Rather, it's Matapelo Mahabe on the business news today. Well, financial indicators, $1 is trading at 15 rand 73 cents in South Africa. In Botswana, it's 12 pula 93. In Namibia, it is trading at 15 Namibian dollars 73. The Zambian kwacha is trading at 19 kwacha 73 cents to the US dollar. In Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 11. In Ethiopia, it is trading at 155 birr 29. In Uganda, it is trading at 3,000 shilling 547. In Tanzania, it is trading at 2,000 shilling 550. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 391. In Egypt, the dollar is trading at 46 Egyptian pound 81. In Tunisia, it is trading at 2 dinar 83. In Algeria, it is trading at 128 dinar 37. In Morocco, the dollar is trading at 8 dirham 90. In Angola, the dollar is trading at 912 kwanza, while the Congolese franc is trading at 2,231 to the US dollar. A look at your commodities: gold is trading at $5,042 and platinum at $2,310 per ounce, while the price of Brent crude oil is at $70.41 a barrel. That was me, Matapala Mahape, with your business indicators at this hour. For any news stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business News, I am Matapala Mahape.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
And at 4:34, let's head over to the sports desk for the latest business of sport news.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Thami. We kick off with football news. Raheem Sterling's representatives are in talks with 7 interested clubs after he mutually agreed to terminate his Chelsea contract. All options are on the table for the Sterling, who is now a free agent. He will not restrict his search for a new club for London. He is willing to play anywhere. The 31-year-old winger has not played a competitive game since the final day of last season in May 2025 when he was on loan at Arsenal. Sterling had 18 months left on a contract that could have cost Chelsea $30 million if he were to stay until it ran out in the summer of 2027. The winger, a $57 million arrival from Man City in 2022, was the first man signing under Chelsea current owners. He joined in summer when co-owner Todd Boehly had installed himself as interim sporting director. Still on football news, Trent Alexander-Arnold's market value has fallen following his move from Liverpool to Real Madrid, where persistent injuries have limited his impact at the Spanish club. The past few months have proved difficult for both the Spanish team and the fullback, whose move was driven by considerable career aspirations. Transfer market database lists Alexander-Arnold's current transfer worth $82.8 million, a $5.9 million reduction from the $88.7 million he was valued at during his final month at Anfield. Lesotho's failed high-altitude sports center, the decaying Rapukulana facility, was built in 2005 but has never been fully operational. It is a missed opportunity for athletes from South Africa and Lesotho. Built in 2005 to attract elite athletes, the $3 million Rapukulana Center has never been fully operational. Communities around Rapukulana say promised jobs and local economic benefits never materialize. Now South Africa plans to revive the abandoned center as a regional high-altitude training club. And in swimming news, we wrap up with Swimming South Africa SSA under investigation over Franschhoek High Performance Center debacle. A decade of talk, 5 years of building, and nothing to show for it, as Franschhoek High School, where Swimming South Africa's High Performance Center was to have been built, is a decaying wasteland. The establishment of Franschhoek High Performance Center has been in the pipeline for close to a decade under Swimming South Africa. Yet, there is nothing to show for it but a few derelict buildings and weeds. Now, SSA will face the Special Investigation Unit, the SIU, to explain where more than $3 million in funds have disappeared. The project has been brought to a halt with corroding half-built infrastructure outlining what was intended to be built. SSA received funding from World Aquatics around $539,000, the National Lotteries Commission about $2 million, and the Sports Trust about $381,000 to finance the project. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Fikile Lungwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Stay ahead with Africa in Business, where Thami Ngubeni unpacks your go-to source for Africa's economic trends and development.
It has gone exactly 4:38 Central African time. Thank you to Matapelo Mohape as well as Figile Lengwati. We turn our attention now to the United States, where US President Donald Trump is set to announce his nominee to replace Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell, with former Federal Reserve Governor Kevin Walsh emerging as the leading contender. Markets have rallied and prediction markets heavily favor Walsh, who is widely expected to be named when Trump makes the official announcement. Our economics reporter, Innocent Simosa, spoke to Nolan Vapinar, head of fixed income at Anchor Capital, about the developments at the U.S. Federal Reserve.
Let's start with Jerome Powell. And President Trump has been very openly critical of the chair, specifically because he has felt that he wanted interest rate cuts to come through faster, and the chair of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, was holding back on interest rate cuts. This has probably been going on for almost a year now, with various abusive tweets, etc. And it escalated to the point where there was a criminal investigation into Jerome Powell's conduct, specifically pertaining to a building that they built. But it was broadly seen as an unprecedented attack on the chairman of the Federal Reserve. And this has eroded a lot of confidence in the US and the US currency as a result of these actions. So, with that in context and knowing that President Trump really just wants lower interest rates, very much market participants, Anchor included, have been expecting that he would appoint a new Fed chair who was going to give us rampant, for lack of a better word, interest rate cuts, pushing interest rates way back to the lows that we saw pre-COVID, just to continue to generate growth within the economy and, to be honest, to deal with the inflationary effect at a later stage. So at that stage, Rick Rieder was actually expected to be the trigger man for interest rate cuts, and the market didn't like this very much. So it was almost a surprise about a week and a half ago when President Trump pretty much said, no, it's not going to be Mr. Rieder. And instead, the market sort of turned attention towards Kevin Waller, who is now nominated as the next Federal Reserve Chairman. The market has taken this as a bit of a sigh of relief, to be honest, because we aren't getting someone who's going to be a bit of a maverick in that role. And instead, there's somebody who's possibly a bit more conservative, a bit more traditional in approach. And given things that have been happening in Washington, this is actually met quite positively by the markets. Now, unfortunately, if I'm sitting in South Africa, what is good for the US dollar and makes the dollar stronger kind of makes the rand a little bit weaker. So we're in this situation where the fact that actually you've got a more credible than expected Fed chairman coming in, it means South African rand's a little bit weaker today. It means South African financial assets are a little bit weaker because people are giving a sigh of relief and giving a bit of support to American assets.
There are reports that the former Federal Reserve Governor, Kevin Walsh, might take over as a new federal chair. What do you know about him?
To be honest, he is a name that has been around a bit. I think he is more traditional in approach. He is somebody who is concerned about inflation. He's given speeches where he's been openly against sort of uncontrolled interest rate cuts. He is somebody who is concerned about the size of the US balance sheet, about the amount of quantitative easing, and he wants to take a more conservative approach on that. So from all of these perspectives, I actually think he's quite a credible future chairman.
Trump has previously criticized high interest rates. Is there a risk rather that monetary policy could become more politically influenced under a new Fed chair?
I think to a degree it already has become more politically sort of controlled by Trump. I think the attacks on the Fed are unprecedented and have already caused concerns. In terms of the new Fed chair, I'm very sure that he is aware that President Trump is looking for further interest rate cuts. I think that will be part of the mandate and the pressure brought upon him. But that being said, I feel that Kevin Walsh is potentially a chairman who is able to resist some of that pressure, who's able to obviously take a view on interest rate cuts, but at the same time understands the consequences, the risks of going too far too fast. So he probably brings a bit more balance than some of the other Fed chairmen that have been possibilities that were bandied about.
How might the US dollar, in your view, respond to perceptions of a less independent Federal Reserve?
The US dollars is all about the amount of trust that you've got in the US financial system. And a less independent chair would clearly erode the trust. So that is part of why it's very important that they have a chairman who is perceived to be slightly more independent, albeit in a sort of difficult political environment.
That was economics reporter Innocent Samosa speaking there to Nolan Vapanar, head of fixed income at NCAP Capital.
Stay ahead with Africa in Business, where Thami Ngubeni unpacks your go-to source for Africa's economic trends and development.
It is exactly 4:44 Central African time. Now, South African salary earners showed surprising resilience in the year 2025, with the Pay Inc. net salary index remaining above year-ago levels, and this is despite rather rough and tough economic conditions. The big question now, however, is whether that momentum can be sustained throughout 2026. Our reporter, Leboheng Mabange, has more on this.
The Pay Inc. Net Salary Index, which tracks the average nominal net salaries of more than 2 million South Africans, maintained strong momentum throughout 2025, even as companies faced rising costs and economic pressure. According to independent economist Elise Kruger, this resilience reflects improving economic conditions.
The resilience of net salaries, despite multiple challenges in the South African economy in 2025, is a reflection of the gradual improvement in economic activity observed. Real GDP growth for 2025 should end at about 1.3%, compared to the previous year's 0.5%, so almost double. And that additional economic activity resulted in companies increasing their profits and have been in a better space to offer good salary increases during the course of 2025.
While businesses continue to face cost pressures, Kruger says that these pressures have eased compared to previous years, improving the outlook for salaries.
Yes, companies are still facing rising costs, although we have seen a moderation in that regard. Average producer price inflation for 2025 is likely to come in at about 1.5%, rising this year to 2.9%, but still below 3%. So yes, there's rising costs, but not to the extent that we have seen in the past. From that point of view, and given that we expect real GDP growth to be about 1.6% in 2026, I do indeed I believe that salary growth similar to what we had in 2025 is indeed sustainable and possible for 2026.
Looking ahead to 2026, inflation and interest rate expectations could further support salary growth.
Zooming into the expectations for inflation and interest rates in 2026, on the inflation side, I forecast a 3.4% average, just marginally above the 21-year low of 3.2% that were recorded for 2025. So inflation in South Africa well under control. Looking at interest rates, the fact that we do have inflation under control and the fact that we still have real or high real interest rates in South Africa, there's indeed scope for further interest rate cuts. So I think both inflation and interest rates per se are positive tailwinds for the South African economy in 2026 and should support the economic growth outlook and specifically the growth forecast of up to 1.6%.
With economic growth expected to strengthen and inflation remaining under control, economists believe salary growth could remain resilient, offering some relief for South African workers in the year ahead. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Lebogang Mabange in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Africa, voici Abedi.
Oui, c'est moi.
Abedi est un passionné de musique dans l'âme. Il a un goût pour toutes sortes de musique et passe ses journées à écouter Channel Africa.
J'aime beaucoup la musique africaine.
Ok. Devinez quoi? Channel Africa veut aider Abedi et les mélomanes du monde entier à découvrir encore plus de musique incroyable. C'est pourquoi Channel Africa appelle les artistes africains à soumettre leur musique. Chers artistes, n'oubliez pas de nous fournir toutes vos informations pertinentes à l'email adresse musique@channelafrica.co.za. Les soumissions sont votre chance d'être entendues, mais elles ne garantissent pas une playlist. Toutes les soumissions seront soigneusement examinées pour voir si elles répondent aux exigences de notre station. Channel Africa, la perspective africaine.
Africa in Business delivers key insights and real-time updates on Africa's growing markets with Thami Ngubeni. The African Perspective on Channel Africa.
Channel Africa. It has gone exactly 4:48 Central African time. Now, this is a topic we've been discussing in quite a bit of detail here on Africa in Business over the past week or so. And it's all around Chinese imports as far as the automotive industry is concerned. It happens now that the country, South Africa, is considering imposing tariffs of up to 50% on vehicles imported from China and India, in an effort to protect its domestic automotive industry from a surge of imports. The country's Department of Trade, Industry and Competition is reportedly conducting an internal review to assess the potential measures aimed at curbing inbound shipments, which policymakers say are undermining local manufacturing. Meanwhile, the Motor Industry Staff Association, a trade union, has criticized the proposal, arguing that the government should not protect one sector at the expense of others. For more on this, we're joined on the line by Ayabonga Tsawe, the Chief Commissioner of the International Trade Administration Commission of South Africa. A very good afternoon to you, Aya. Good to be talking to you once again. And it's, yes, the end of January, so I can still say Happy New Year. This is my last day. Welcome.
Well, indeed, as a family, afternoon to you. And I guess we're saying compliments of the season until the end of the first quarter. So you're certainly in good company.
Well, you really are extending this, but look, I'll take it if you're offering. So let's take a look at this, Aya. From ITAC's point of view, what impact has the vehicle imports from China as well as India had on South Africa's automotive industry?
Well, I think what's clear to us from the data that we see on trade flows, especially under Chapter 87 of the tariff schedule, is that we've seen a reordering of historically trade patterns in the domestic market. So you would have seen in 2025 that there would have been record new vehicle sales in South Africa. But I think we are seeing a historic share of those new sales being attributed to imports. If you look at our industry about 10 or 20 years ago, the bulk of the vehicles one saw on the roads in South Africa would have been vehicles that are assembled here in South Africa or manufactured to some degree here in South Africa. That trend has been inverted somewhat on the back of the rapid capacity expansion one has seen in some of the markets you've mentioned. But I don't think it's only just about China and India. There are also many other places in the world, I include Thailand among those, where many global original equipment manufacturers, OEMs, are beginning to offshore their production, whether that is European OEMs or even Japanese, to some of these Asian nations. And I think the discussion and internal review that is led by the DTIC is having to contend with that development as one of the issues it is looking at. That review, Thami, I must add for the benefit of your listeners, goes beyond just consideration of the policy space we have in tariff terms, where that we've already communicated the bound rates of 50% on passenger vehicles and about 30% on parts and accessories. but it's also about looking at the other tax-related elements of the automotive package. One being the ad valorem tax, which is a form of luxury tax. The other being the duty credit certificates generated in our auto industrial program and how those are used by importers to bring in vehicles. And then there's also consideration of the applicability to different parts of the auto value chain of some of our investment incentives as well. So I think there's a much wider and more far-reaching review that is underway. And it's just a pity that I think much of the focus in the reportage has solely been on the question of tariffs and what is possible in that instance. But there's so much more, I think, under the bonnet of that particular review and what outcomes it might yield.
And we hope and we'll create further opportunities, Ayabonga, to invite you back so we can actually further unpack those developments. But for now, we do thank you so much for your time and for that update. Okay, thank you. That's Ayabonga Gcawe, the Chief Commissioner of the International Trade Administration Commission of South Africa, taking us to exactly 4:53.
Get Channel Africa on DSTV Audio Bouquet. Channel 802.
In just a few moments' time, the Friday edition of Vue d'Afrique will be coming on air with Joëlle, and she's here to tell us what they've got in store. What's on your menu aujourd'hui?
Bonjour Thami, bonjour à tous les auditeurs. Aujourd'hui sur Vue d'Afrique, il sera question du Burkina Faso. Le gouvernement annonce la dissolution de tous les partis politiques. Et nous parlerons aussi du Niger, où le président Abdourahmane Tiani accuse les chefs d'État français, Emmanuel Macron, les chefs d'État français, Emmanuel Macron, béninois, Patrice Talon et ivoirien Alassane Ouattara d'être les commanditaires de l'attaque de l'aéroport. C'est tout à l'heure sur Vue d'Afrique. Merci de rester connecté. Merci Thami.
Merci beaucoup. That's Joëlle coming up at the top of the hour with Vue d'Afrique.
We are on Open Views Audio Bouquet. Channel 628.
Our last story for this Friday afternoon is around Decode, a Pan-African strategic communications and advisory firm. They've published the 6th edition of the annual South African Government Leaders on X report. Now, under the theme Year of Reckoning and Resilience, the study highlights stark contrasts across government departments and state-owned companies in the year of 2025. It has been revealed that, as some institutions face significant credibility and accountability challenges, others achieved notable improvements in both operational performance and public reputation. For more on this, we joined on the line by Lorato Chenkeng, the Chief Executive Officer at Decode. Lorato, good to be talking to you once again in this new year. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Thami, and compliments to you.
Compliments to you too. Won't you take us through the main themes and the findings of the 6th edition of the South African Government Leaders on X report?
Sure. So some of the key takeouts, and maybe firstly, before I take you through the key takeouts, in the previous 5 editions, Thami, we're mainly and only focusing on the South African cabinet, right? The national cabinet with the president and deputy president and their ministers and the respective premiers in provinces and the members of the executive councils, right? We then decided to expand it in this year. So the 6th edition includes 275 public entities and state-owned companies. And the reason we really did that was that, we are almost close to 2 trillion rand economy, and to a great extent, particularly the state-owned entities, they manage and produce a couple of the things that we need. If you think about Eskom, for instance, no economy runs without power generation, right? Whether it's us receiving power in our homes or industry requiring it to, burn furnaces so that they can beneficiate. And it was in that way where we then looked at one, that Eskom is on, or at least the brand itself is on X. Is the group CEO, Ndate Den Marokane, on the platform. And we found that one of the first key findings is that a majority of the CEOs of these state-owned companies, unlike cabinet members, where more than 80% of the cabinet members are on X, you have, the thing inverted where less than 20% of the CEOs and heads of the state-owned entities are on X, right? And therefore, of course, there's a missing opportunity of ordinarily you and I want to connect with humans to a great extent. We understand that ESCOM exists as an institution, but sometimes when there's a crisis in particular, when there's a connection between humans, it resonates better, particularly where trust levels are low, credibility is an issue. The other one that we found is that because we are now in the coalition or shared government space, you now have a couple of provinces having different parties or at least coalition governments happening, right? There's a sense of call it a tussle sometimes between or at least amongst the party members. So you look at the Ministry of Communications and Digital Communications, where the minister is from the Democratic Alliance and the deputy minister is from the African National Congress. You then find that there are tussles around policy issues, whether it's Elon Musk's Starlink coming to South Africa, whether it's about the public broadcasters bill being referred back to Parliament. That conflict plays itself out on X and other social platforms. Thami?
So how can these insights from the report inform government communication strategies moving forward?
One and most important is that you are absent on these platforms. It does not mean that citizens are not there and having the conversation. So it means that when you are not there, firstly, you are missing, your finger is not on the pulse. But secondly, and most importantly, which is now, when you are on these platforms, the most important thing is going to be, do you create capacity to be able to engage? So if you think about President Cyril Ramaphosa as an example, or any African leader, particularly who's on X, like Paul Kagame and a couple of others, right? I imagine that none of the citizens believe that President Kagame or even President Ramaphosa handles their own account, right? But there is a sense that the personality in the president and the presidency as as an office is responsive to people's citizens' complaints, issues, and the things that they want to raise on that platform, right? So the communication strategy, therefore, should be, one, presence should be a non-negotiable. Two, that presence must then be capacitated by qualified and experienced communicators who know how to be a little bit more responsive. But thirdly, they must also be politically mature, particularly where you have South Africa. We are now only 32nd year of democracy. You can imagine, Thami, the maturity of our democracy is still where political intolerance is still very high, right? You can see how people are highly charged in conversations. And
we'll have to unfortunately leave it at that for Lorato for this afternoon. But certainly, already as you're speaking, I've got so many names and people and personalities coming up when you speak about all of these various aspects of how CEOs and public officials communicate on social media platforms and how accessible they now are to the communities that they serve. Thank you so much for your time and all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's Lorato Chenkeng, the Chief Executive Officer at Decode. It's exactly 5 p.m. Central African Time. That's how we, as Africa in Business, come to the end of this week's edition. And we hand the reins over now to the French desk with Vue d'Afrique avec Joël. Restez connectés.
Conversations are happening, and Channel Africa is at the heart of them. We tell the African story with clarity, pride, and purpose, reaching audiences that matter to your brand. Partner with us and connect your business with listeners across borders in multiple languages and markets. For partnership opportunities, sponsorship, or sales, email us at partnership@channelafrica.co.za. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Vue d'Afrique, un magazine des actualités en français sur